As Dax, in the darkest corners of London, had built an empire no one dared touch, until a routine traffic stop of a low-level runner unraveled the web of lies. What followed was a wild police chase, a high-stakes hunt, and the shocking discovery that brought down the UK's most ruthless and untouchable drug boss. For over a decade, one name haunted the streets of East London: Damien Rowe, better known in the underworld as Dax. To the public, he didn't exist. No arrest records, no photos, no social media. He was a ghost. But on the streets, in the alleys and estates, his presence was everywhere. From the south of Croydon to the edges of Hackney, drugs moved silently, money flowed upward, and fear kept mouths shut. Dax didn't run his empire like a gangster. He ran it like a corporation. He stayed invisible, pulling strings from the shadows, while his lieutenants took the risks. Dax's rise began quietly in the early 2010s, selling pills outside nightclubs with nothing but a burner phone and a bicycle. But he was smart, calculating, and most of all, patient. While other street dealers flashed cash and ended up in handcuffs, Dax saved, reinvested, and watched. He learned who to bribe, who to threaten, and who to leave alone. By 2016, he controlled the supply of cocaine and MDMA across large parts of East London. He never touched the product himself. He never carried a phone tied to his real identity. Every move was strategic. Every transaction went through layers of middlemen, couriers, and fake businesses. He made sure that if one piece fell, the rest of the machine kept running. Police investigations constantly hit dead ends. Surveillance teams found nothing. Informants mysteriously vanished. Even when a major bust happened, the trail never led to Dax. Detectives began calling him the Ghost, a name that only fed his legend. For local gangs, working under Dax meant protection and profit. Refusing him meant trouble. His reach was long, and his methods were ruthless. Homes were burned, families threatened. In some cases, bodies disappeared without a trace. While other crime bosses sought power through violence, Dax used silence and control. He kept his circle small. No more than 10 people truly knew what he looked like. Every meeting was in a new location, often with blindfolded drivers and no phones allowed. He trusted no one, and that's why no one could catch him. For years, he was untouchable. A shadow king ruling a kingdom no one could prove existed. But every king leaves a footprint, even one hiding in the dark, and eventually someone would find it. Dax built his empire on one simple rule: never get your hands dirty. To anyone looking in, his life appeared clean. No criminal record, no flashy spending, no online footprint. On paper, he was a successful entrepreneur involved in shipping, logistics, and property investment. But behind the polished surface, he ran one of the most complex drug operations the UK had ever seen. The brilliance of Dax's operation wasn't in how much product he moved, it was in how well he hid the money. His laundering system was meticulous. The drug money came in cash, collected by young runners and street dealers, who dropped it off at nondescript cafes, car washes, and second-hand phone shops. From there, it was funneled into fake businesses, cleaning services that didn't clean, events companies that never hosted events, and churches that had no congregations. These businesses filed just enough paperwork to look real. Their bank accounts accepted deposits that appeared legitimate, processed through a web of accountants who asked no questions. Crypto added another layer. Dax was one of the first UK traffickers to embrace digital currency. His network used it not just for storing profits, but for paying suppliers overseas. Transactions were fragmented and spread across dozens of wallets, each tied to aliases created using fake IDs from Eastern Europe. By the time authorities even noticed the movement of funds, they had already been converted, concealed, or moved out of reach. Even his physical storage was genius. Drugs weren't kept in gang flats or abandoned buildings. They were hidden in shipping containers registered to import-export companies. Some were tucked behind false walls in storage units or inside vehicles parked long-term in private lots. Each site held only a portion of the product, and no one courier ever knew more than one location. If a stash was seized, it barely scratched the surface. Dax paid his people just enough to keep them loyal, but never enough to get sloppy. Every driver, every handler was replaceable. Nothing was written down. He used face-to-face meetings or disposable phones that were destroyed after a single use. Detectives suspected his wealth, but could never prove it. When they looked, they saw a man with clean tax returns and a modest lifestyle. But underground, the cash never stopped flowing. Dax was a ghost to law enforcement, but to the streets he was a god. In early 2025, after years of failed attempts to link Dax to anything solid, a stroke of luck finally cracked open the door. It started with a minor arrest. An insignificant street runner, named Marcus, picked up in a routine traffic stop in Tottenham. He had no drugs on him, just a few £1,000s in cash and a cheap burner phone. At first glance, it was nothing. Another low-level player in a game far above his head. But when detectives ran a quick check on the phone, something unusual appeared. The device was almost empty. No saved contacts, no messages, no call history. But hidden in the Notes app was a list of GPS coordinates, each labeled with cryptic two-letter codes and dates. It wasn't much, but it was strange enough to raise eyebrows. Digital analysts were brought in, and the coordinates were quickly mapped out. What emerged was a quiet but clear pattern. Locations scattered across London and the outskirts. Always visited on Fridays, always at specific times. One site stood out, a self-storage facility near Luton. Surveillance from the facility showed the same unmarked white van pulling in every Friday at precisely 3:17 p.m. The driver never stayed more than 10 minutes. He wore gloves, a cap pulled low, and avoided every camera, but the van itself had no registered owner. Its number plates were cloned. That was enough to get the attention of the Serious Crime Unit. Police decided to wait, setting up discreet surveillance outside the site. For 6 weeks, they watched the pattern repeat with military precision. No one entered the storage unit between visits. No workers approached it. No lights ever came on. But each time the van arrived, it left just a few minutes later, sometimes lighter, sometimes heavier. Then on the 7th Friday they moved in. The driver never saw it coming. He was taken down silently, and the unit was breached under a court-approved warrant. Inside, police found over £1.6 million worth of cocaine, tightly sealed and sorted by region. But that wasn't the biggest discovery. In the corner, hidden beneath a stack of boxes, was an old leather notebook. Inside was a list of initials, payment figures, drop locations, and at the top of one page, circled twice, the letters DR. For the first time, detectives had more than just shadows. They had a trace. The self-storage raid near Luton sent ripples through the entire task force. For years investigators had been chasing shadows, but now they had something tangible. The drugs were significant. Yes, but the real gold was the notebook, a rare mistake in an otherwise flawless operation. Handwritten, in a clean, sharp style, the pages listed drop sites, coded names, large cash figures, and scheduling notes that lined up almost perfectly with known activity on the street. But one detail stood out, a set of recurring initials, DR, next to the largest transactions. Detectives had no doubt who that pointed to. While forensics combed through the storage unit, another team traced the seized van. Its number plates were fake, its VIN scratched out, but traces of mud from the tires gave investigators a new direction. Soil samples matched a narrow stretch of farmland on the outskirts of Essex. That location wasn't on any previous map of suspected stash houses. Surveillance was deployed immediately. The site appeared to be a defunct warehouse used for importing second-hand tires. On paper, it had been closed for over 2 years. In reality, it was a front. Drones spotted unmarked lorries arriving late at night, unloading sealed crates with zero oversight. No lights, no noise, no guards, just quick, clinical movements. Within days, police had obtained a search warrant. What they found inside would shift the entire investigation into high gear. Behind a wall of stacked tires were hidden compartments loaded with high-grade cocaine, compressed cannabis, and a stockpile of unregistered weapons. The estimated street value? Over $2 million. But more than the drugs, what stunned detectives was the level of organization. Every box was labeled with a code, marked with distribution zones and quantities. There were shipping manifests, fake customs declarations, and even printed spreadsheets tracking delivery cycles. This wasn't a gang's hideout, it was a distribution hub. But the real breakthrough came from a dusty laptop hidden inside a locked filing cabinet. Though encrypted, early scans showed records stretching back nearly a decade. Dates matched known busts, names matched surveillance suspects, and always, buried in the code or scribbled in margins, those same two letters, D. The evidence was mounting. For the first time, law enforcement had something that could directly link the empire back to Damian Rowe. All they needed now was proof he was still calling the shots. With the evidence piling up, the authorities knew they were getting closer, but close wasn't enough. They needed something that couldn't be explained away, something that put Damian Rowe at the center of it all, in real time. So, a specialized task force was formed in complete secrecy. It was called Operation Pale Fire, and its mission was simple: follow the logistics, track the flow of drugs, and find the man behind the empire. Every officer was vetted, every move recorded. No leaks, no second chances. The first phase began with tracing the supply chain. Investigators revisited every location from the notebook and cross-referenced them with transport routes flagged in the warehouse laptop. One pattern kept repeating: a route starting at a private dockyard in Essex, ending somewhere near Northampton. Every 2 weeks, unmarked white vans collected cargo from this dock. The crates were always labeled as electrical supplies, but no official paperwork existed for the shipments. When checked against maritime traffic logs, the vessels bringing the cargo in were tied to shell companies registered in Malta, Cyprus, and the British Virgin Islands. Undercover teams staked out the dockyard. What they saw confirmed their suspicions. Each shipment arrived late at night and was received by the same crew of masked men. The vans that left were switched out every few miles, transferring the cargo between vehicles to confuse surveillance. The trail would then split. Some vans headed to Birmingham, others to Liverpool, and a few disappeared into rural backroads. It was methodical, professional, and well-practiced. But one van was different. It always left last. It was heavier, slower, and followed an odd route, avoiding main roads and traveling through remote farmland. Police decided to tail it carefully, using a low-flying drone and relay tracking devices to avoid detection. The van's final stop was a large property in the countryside, surrounded by trees and shielded from aerial view. There were no signs, no security cameras, and no registered address on file, but heat sensors revealed multiple bodies inside. For weeks, the task force observed silently, collecting data. New vehicles came and went. Deliveries were made. Armed men patrolled the grounds. And once, just briefly, a figure stepped out wearing a dark coat and cap. Facial recognition software ran the footage. The result came back in under 10 seconds. Match found: Damian Rowe. He was alive, operational, and still running the empire. Now they just had to catch him. Just as the task force began preparing a long-term plan to close in on Damian Rowe, an unexpected twist changed everything. In the early hours of a rainy Tuesday morning, an anonymous email landed in the secure inbox of Operation Pale Fire. It was short, cryptic, and unsigned. No name, no IP address traceable. Just one line of text: "He'll be there. Don't mess this up." This time, the police were ready. Spike strips were hidden beneath hedges. Aerial drones tracked the tree line. Tactical units were positioned at 3 different intercept points. At 11:07 p.m., a convoy of 2 vehicles, a lead SUV and a trailing motorcycle, was spotted leaving a secured garage in Cambridge. Police followed silently. For 40 minutes the vehicles moved cautiously, but steadily, making no stops. Then, without warning, The motorcycle peeled off, and the SUV accelerated fast. The driver had seen something. What followed was one of the wildest police pursuits in UK history. The SUV tore through sleepy villages and pitch-black motorways at speeds topping 130 miles per hour. It blew past spike strips, dodged roadblocks, and even crashed through a wooden gate into private farmland. Helicopters lit up the fields as officers tried to pin it down, but the vehicle was built for off-road endurance. Ditches, fences, hedgerows, nothing slowed it down. Police were forced to deploy a tactical pursuit and containment (TPAC) maneuver. A specialized interceptor rammed the SUV at high speed, forcing it to flip onto its side in the middle of a plowed field. Officers rushed in with rifles drawn. The vehicle's door was kicked open, and a man was dragged out, bloodied but alive. For a moment, it felt like victory. But when the man was identified, the celebration stopped. He wasn't Damien Rowe. He was a body double surgically altered, dressed in Dax's signature clothing, even carrying ID in Rowe's name. The deception was almost perfect. The real Dax had vanished again, and the task force was back to chasing ghosts. But this time, they had more than a clue. They had proof he was scared. The discovery of the body double sent shockwaves through the task force. It wasn't just a setback, it is a message. Damien Rowe knew they were close, and he was willing to burn a decoy to stay ahead. The operation had been airtight, the pursuit calculated to the second, yet he had managed to stay one step ahead again. But in his rush to escape, he left behind something far more valuable than anyone expected. As forensic teams swept through the overturned SUV, they found a hidden compartment behind the dashboard. Inside was a slim, reinforced case containing a solid-state hard drive. It was unmarked, encrypted, and unusually heavy, clearly custom-built. No one knew what was on it, but the moment it was logged into evidence, cyber analysts from the National Crime Agency were brought in. The data was protected by multi-layered encryption, but early scans suggested it contained more than just simple records. It took weeks, but slowly the drive began to open up. Inside was a trove of digital files, dozens of folders labeled with cryptic tags and numbers. But buried deep in the structure was something the task force never expected: raw, unedited video footage. Not security tapes, not surveillance footage, but personal recordings. Hidden cameras, likely placed in Dax's own meeting rooms and safe houses, had captured high-level transactions, drug deals and private conversations. In one chilling clip, Damien Rowe was seen sitting at a table, surrounded by armed guards, reviewing shipment schedules on a projector screen. His face was clearly visible. He referenced payments made in crypto, detailed drop locations across 4 cities, and even joked about evading police surveillance. There it was, visual proof of leadership, involvement, and operational control. Not hearsay, not speculation. Direct evidence, recorded from within his own network. But that wasn't all. Alongside the videos were financial records, meticulous spreadsheets showing profits, losses, crypto wallet IDs, and offshore banking transfers, account numbers traced to shell companies in the Cayman Islands, Belize, and Luxembourg, all tied back to fake identities that investigators now knew belonged to Rowe. The hard drive was the crack in the armor. With it, prosecutors could finally build a case that showed Dax wasn't just the name whispered in alleyways. He was the mastermind, fully in control, and very, very real. Now all that remained was finding him before he vanished for good. With the hard drive decoded and its contents secured, Operation Pale Fire had what it needed to make their case. But even with the footage, the finances and the logistics, all pointing to Damien Rowe, one crucial piece was still missing: his exact location. He could have been anywhere, abroad under a fake identity, buried in a city safe house, or hiding in plain sight. The task force knew time was against them. The longer Dax remained free, the more likely he was to disappear permanently. But hidden within one of the decrypted spreadsheets was a routine expense labeled simply as maintenance, estate RZ. The payment was processed monthly, always the same amount. always routed through a shell company based in Glasgow. The task force had never seen this reference before. Curious, analysts followed the financial trail, eventually linking it to a rural property registered under the name of a defunct environmental trust. It was located deep in the Scottish Highlands, near a small village that had fewer than 50 residents. The estate didn't appear on any standard map. Satellite images showed only dense forest and rolling hills. But older land registry documents revealed something else. A stone manor built in the 1800s, long abandoned, then quietly renovated in 2019 under permits tied to the fake trust. That was enough to move. 2 reconnaissance teams were deployed under extreme secrecy. Using thermal imaging and long-range surveillance, they confirmed signs of recent human activity, heat signatures, fuel deliveries, even a private satellite dish positioned behind a tree line. No vehicles ever left the estate. No guests ever arrived. Whatever was happening inside, it was heavily insulated from the outside world. Then, after 8 days of observation, a familiar face appeared on the property grounds. A man with a heavy beard, walking alone at dawn, wearing the same dark coat seen in earlier footage. Facial recognition confirmed it. Damien Rowe was inside. But what made the situation more surreal was what lay beneath the estate. A hidden basement bunker, camouflaged from aerial view, equipped with reinforced walls, independent power, and a network of escape tunnels. It was the final layer of Dax's empire, his fortress. It explained why no one had been able to find him for so long. Now, for the first time, the task force had eyes on the ghost in his last stronghold. The decision to move in on the Scottish estate was made quickly, but carefully. This wasn't just any raid, it was the final chapter in a decade-long hunt for a man who had outwitted the best police forces in the UK. The operation involved dozens of officers from local units, armed response teams and specialist negotiators, all coordinated by Operation Pale Fire. The goal was clear: capture Damien Rowe alive, gather evidence, and end his reign for good. On a cold, misty morning, the perimeter was secured. Drones buzzed overhead, scanning the dense forest that hid the estate. Teams moved in silently through the undergrowth, mindful of the remote location and potential traps. The main house was eerily quiet, windows were barred, and the satellite dish gleamed faintly in the low light. But the real prize was beneath. Using blueprints recovered from the decrypted hard drive, tactical officers found the concealed entrance to the underground bunker. It was hidden beneath an old stone patio, masked by overgrown ivy and heavy slabs. The door was reinforced steel, protected by biometric locks and coded panels. The police bomb squad worked carefully to disable the security without setting off alarms. Inside, the bunker was like a fortress. Dimly lit corridors stretched for hundreds of meters, lined with rooms filled with computers, surveillance monitors, and communication devices. Shipping manifests and ledgers sat neatly stacked on desks. But Damien Rowe himself was nowhere to be seen. Hours of searching revealed one clue: a narrow escape tunnel, just wide enough for a man. It led through a labyrinth of underground paths that eventually surfaced several miles away, beneath an abandoned barn. Outside, a waiting black motorcycle idled in the shadows. No one was around, but it was clear someone had used the tunnel recently. Despite the escape, the raid was a success. Police seized massive amounts of